I want to talk specifically about round two team heads up. Before we talk about our match, we have to talk about one hand that you played with Charlie right before you played against me. And it was actually the very first hand that you played with Charlie. 10K, 20K, 100 big blinds. You're on the button, you raised, and he 3-bet to 140. You have a suited queen here. You have to call here, right?
Yeah, I think when we're that deep, I'm definitely going to be calling the suited combos and, folding the offsuit combos there.
You guys both flop top pair and a re-raise pot. Big cooler for heads up, right? You don't have backdoor clubs, but you have top pair, so you have to call, right?
Yeah, definitely not going to go anywhere on the flop, for sure.
At this point in the hand, the turn comes to 6 of diamonds. You still have top pair heads up. How did you feel on the turn? Did you feel you're most likely ahead and just letting him hang himself, or are you slightly concerned when he double barrels?
It's definitely concerning when he double barrels because I'm obviously not blocking some of the premium overpairs, right? Like I don't block aces or kings. I obviously block a lot of top pair combos here, but I also don't block hands like king jack suited, jack 10 suited. I don't block any hearts. And so I felt like it's one of those I have to call again on the turn and decide on the river.
Yeah, I mean, I think one good thing is that you do have position here working for you. So certain scare cards come on the river. If it's a heart or a one-liner, a 7 or an 8, you have the position to see how he's going to react.
Absolutely.
Absolute worst card comes for you on the river. Queen of spades. This is the very first hand. He shoves and you're thinking like, oh my God, like, I have to just face this decision right here. I have top trips, no kicker. What were your thoughts here?
It's funny because obviously in this situation, when I see the river card come off before Charlie acts, basically, I'm happy in the sense of like, he should have some give ups now. And a part of me is also thinking, okay, if and when he checks to me, what size am I going to make it? Right. This is before Charlie acts, right? And so when Charlie acts though, and he goes all in, it's very polarizing now what he has. It's a spot where I have a lot of queen X's, actually. I have a lot of trips calling a 3-bet pre-flop. I have all of those middling suited queen X type hands. So it's actually a tough spot for Charlie to bluff because he has a little bit of a nut advantage, but not much. Like it's like a very good river card in the sense of, if he had kings or aces, so he's going to obviously sometimes shut down on the river, or he's not going to be betting that size for value either. Because that's not necessarily a great card for him, even when he has like value hands that he's betting through the flop and the turn with. There are obviously some misdraws that I have to consider. Would he be willing to just, on the very first hand of the heads up match, be willing to like fire 3 streets, even on a potentially kind of bad river card? Because, even if Charlie was bluffing there, I don't think that you can ever expect your opponent to be folding trips. Like trying to make your opponent fold trips is like somewhat suicidal. So it just didn't feel like he has that many bluffs as played. And given the dynamic of it being the first hand, and given the dynamic that I felt like Charlie coming into it thought he had an edge against me heads up. Mm-hmm. And if so, I feel like he probably felt like he could take a game plan where he can just chip away at my stack and play kind of lower variance spots. Because if you have an edge, you don't really want to just be like going balls to the wall the very first hand when you feel like you're going to be able to like chip away at me and realize your edge better.
I think you make a really good point in this hand about on this river specifically that it's, out of position for him. It's really hard to bet this river as a bluff, like your hand looks like a lot of queens, and you're losing to specifically the most common hands are like 9-9, 5-5, 7-8, ace queen. Right. And, hands like that. So it's like, it's just really hard for him to have a bluff here. And I think I'm curious about your decision to use coins to buy time extensions. Do you regret that at all in the moment?
No, I definitely didn't regret it in the moment. Like we knew that the gold coins were going to give us an advantage later on.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that in order to have an advantage later on, you have to still be in the competition. Yeah. Like at the end of the day, who cares about how many gold coins I have if I'm not even around to use them? And so at that point, it was more about trying to make the best decision, make the right decision, and taking the proper time to do that. Because also, Fedor had already lost. And so, there was only 2 players standing in Charlie's way at that point. It would be very different if Charlie was the last person that we played against on your team and we had already beat 2 people, then maybe it's like, okay, if I make kind of a hasty decision, we still can send in 2 more people to try to beat Charlie type of deal, right? It was also kind of like that. It was like Charlie had already beat Fedor, so it was kind of important for me to beat Charlie so that we wouldn't be so many people behind.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. In terms of when the timer ran out and your hand was declared dead, it showed in the footage, it's like you didn't know that the time ran out to 0. Now, were you leaning towards calling or folding, do you think, in that moment?
So this is something that I didn't really say to my team specifically or during the whole competition, but I was leaning towards fold, but I didn't want to say that to Charlie, obviously, later when we talked about the hand. Of course, when you're playing a hand on stream, you never want to be seen like you're making crazy folds, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that it doesn't necessarily... Oh, you and me, Andy, you and me. No, I mean, I totally can relate to, we're in the same boat in the sense of just like, sometimes you don't want people to know that or to see that. But I, in the moment, really felt strongly like I should fold. And I just had to remember, like, at the end of the day, I don't care about who's watching. I don't care about what other people think. I have a reason for making the decision that I make, and I have to be able to stand by that decision for myself and not for anybody else.
You not only made the right decision here in a cooler spot, the first hand of the match, but you came in, won the match, which was really impressive because he had you down to 10 big blinds at one point. 10 big blinds, and because of this hand and the timer running out and everything working out, you folding, you won the match against Charlie, and then now I was second up. Now I had to play you. So let's go ahead and jump into our match. Any general thoughts on my game or, what was going through your mind knowing that I was up next?
Well, you and I have actually played against each other enough. And so we have a little bit of history, but they're always in cash games. I know that you're not going to know certain shoving ranges or calling ranges off of certain stack sizes. Like I knew that was something that I felt like I could have an edge against you in.
For sure. I don't know the actual shoving ranges for sub 30 big blinds. I've never really looked at the charts like that, and having much less experience in this format, I basically knew that I had to try to get lucky. So first hand, pick up Queen of Hearts, 10 of Diamonds. You have Ace of Spades, 8 of Diamonds, big blind. I raise the button. You make a standard call. Flop comes 10 of Hearts, 8 of Hearts, 3 of Diamonds. I flop top pair. You flop middle pair, Ace Kicker. This was a wet board. This is level 1 of the match. Blinds are still relatively low. You checked. I c-bet 60K and into 80, and you make a standard call. This is where the hand got interesting. The turn came to Ace of Clubs. You check again. I felt like my hand was better off as a bet here on the turn, and so I can still extract value. What was your thought process on this turn?
For my actual hand, I want to just go ahead and check raise because there's a lot of bad river cards. There's a lot of rivers that could kill my action because of all of those draws. Like if you have combo draws there, you're going to have to continue against a check raise. You're not going to be folding those.
When you check raised, I kind of felt like you might do this, turning a made hand into a bluff. We heard the comments about both David and Charlie discussing about how you don't bluff. He's like, she plays straightforward, but I just feel like you know your image. That's precisely the reason why I think you might make a play here. The leveling, right? And
yeah, it's interesting because, well, 2 things. Like you and I, through our history of playing together, whether it's a spot where I took a line as a bluff against you or against someone else at the table, like, you've seen that. You know what I mean? Like right. David's observation or David's opinion there is kind of weird because I feel like you can't really speak in absolutes. Like to just say like I never have bluffs in that spot is pretty outrageous. And especially in general, I don't show a lot of bluffs. I think maybe David thinks that because I've never shown him a bluff, right? But I don't show anybody bluffs.
Next time you play against David though, you're gonna have to windmill one in his face.
Right? Should I? I feel like maybe I should.
The Jack of Clubs comes on the river and you thought about it for a while before deciding to check. Obviously, I check back here. You lose to Ace Jack, King Queen. Why not bet fold? Or were you trying to induce bluff from me, or what were you thinking?
Yeah, yeah. It was a mix of like some hands that will continue against a check raise on the turn, will have, gotten there on the river, queen, nine of hearts, those types of hands, and king, queen, obviously. But also I was trying to induce a bluff from you because our history, Andy, especially when we're deep stacked, like this is not something I would do if we were shallower, because I know that when we get shallower, I just expect you to kind of bluff less because you're most comfortable like playing really deep stacked. And from all the hands that I know about you that I've seen, or from the ones that we played together, you're the type of person that you're willing to go for it when you're deep stacked. Yeah, it was just one of those situations where you ended up checking back.
I mean, you end up making the right decision anyways. I think if you barreled this river, it's really hard for me to call. And if I did have bluffs myself, very good chance that I might try to represent on this river. I have 8 of clubs, 5 of clubs on the button. Blinds are still 10K, 20K. I raise it up. You have the king, 10 of clubs in the big blind. Why not 3-bet this one?
Yeah, I think I can mix between 3-betting and calling. I want to keep some of like my strongest hands in right now because you're going to just have a lot of like raise folds as well.
Fair enough. Flop comes 6 of hearts, 6 of diamonds, 3 of hearts. I flopped absolutely nothing. You king high here. I make a c-bet. I think you make a pretty standard call. You don't have backdoor clubs, but your hand could very well be best. So the turn's the jack of clubs. You check, and I chose pretty small sizing for the pot, 90K. My thought process at the time was that you could have a lot of floats on the flop. I didn't think I needed to go too big. I felt like if you had a pair, a bigger sizing wasn't going to accomplish much. I thought a smaller sizing was going to do the same to fold out some of those weaker draws and floats. Once you check called, again, I thought your hand was a lot more weighted towards made hands. I thought if you had a draw, you may be more inclined to want to check raise here if you didn't have showdown value. But when you just decided to check call, you could have some jack high flush draws that paired up on the turn. You could have a stubborn 3.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, my hand is one where naturally I felt like it was strong enough to call a bit on the flop. On the turn, it starts to get like a little bit dicier, especially if I felt like I'm going to be faced with a river bet very often. I think this is just one of those spots, like you said, where it seems like I have some decent showdown value once I called twice. So a part of that is like me hoping that would make you shut down on the river. Knowing our history, you are perfectly capable of double barreling with air. So I just felt like king high was too strong to fold against you specifically.
And you were correct. So the river was the queen of spades. You check, you still have king high. And I thought about it for a while before deciding to give up. At this point, once you arrive at the river, like I mentioned on the turn, I had you on a lot of made hands that I didn't think the queen was going to change your decision too much unless I bombed it, And because this was still level 1, I didn't feel it was a good idea for me to invest that many chips as a bluff in level 1. It kind of goes back to what you mentioned earlier about the hand with Charlie. There's just so much play left. Basically, like, I didn't think you were going to fold any showdown value. If you had a 3, you had a jack. I think with the paired board, it makes it harder for you to let go of a pair. Were you prepared to call a river bet here?
Some people in their interviews after the fact, they want to try to like take credit for things that maybe they didn't really feel or think at the time. And that's not how I'm going to like approach my questions. I'm just going to be really honest. I don't know if I would have called a river barrel. I'm not going to sit here and be like, yes, I would have totally stationed you, Andy. Because that just wasn't true. So it would have depended on your sizing probably. I think I would have found a call against certain sizings. Yeah.
So now level 2, 20K, 40K, blinds are up. I have ace 10 offsuit on the button, raise it up. You have the king 8 offsuit, pretty standard call. Flop comes deuce of diamonds, 8 of clubs, 6 of spades, rainbow. You flop top pair and check. I flopped ace high. C-bet here from me. You make a pretty standard call.
Yeah, I can call sometimes. I could check raise sometimes. Again, you're just like a very aggressive player. So I kind of don't mind just like continuing to like on certain turns, just allowing you to barrel again.
The turn comes the deuce of spades, and now you decide to lead 170. What was your thought process here?
So I feel like this is where I kind of want to be balanced with my leads in terms of my strong hands, like trips or top pair and some of my draws, right? So like in this particular spot, let's say I had a hand like 5-4 spades or something, and I turn a lot of equity, then I'm certainly going to have some leads with those types of hands as well as trips. And I also feel like, especially on the turn pairing the bottom pair from the flop, if you had some high card type hands, like all your ace highs, your king highs, you're going to just check and see a free card.
Yeah, another street played by you perfectly, because you got me to call with the ace high. The river comes the 10 of hearts. You still have a pair of eights. in your eyes, still very likely to be the best hand, right? So you decide to bet again. From my perspective, when you bet the river, kind of felt like a little bit of a block bet, but it's still designed to get a lot of worse hands to call. And that's when I knew that I probably got lucky here on the river. Based on the sizing, I thought a raise would probably be much better here with a top pair of tens. And so I did decide to click it back. This is a very gross spot for you because you're getting such great pot odds. What were we thinking here?
I think it was amazing that you found the raise in this spot. And I think for me personally, once you raised, I obviously felt really gross. Could you potentially be targeting my sizing? Yes, but if you were targeting my sizing as a block bet, I don't think you would just min raise it. I feel like you would just shove. Right. Because you're giving me such a good price. So that's what made me feel like it was more weighted towards value. I think I took the time there because I was getting such great pot odds.
Yeah, well, we see you take 4 gold coins here for 2 30-second time extensions. And like you said, I think it's a spot where like it just doesn't feel like a bluff, but then mathematically like you're just getting such great odds trying to decide.
Yeah, and again, it's about, you know, like up until this point, I was the only player that used the time banks in the heads up portion, and I chose to use it again at this juncture. And it's funny because obviously you see David and Charlie really excited about me using time in the back, and then you see, you know, my teammates a little bit surprised that I used time. But I think what people don't realize is this is the pivotal hand of our match. It's a huge decision because I feel like if I'm right, you would be left with 500K. You would be left with 12 and a half big blinds. But if I call and I'm wrong, then basically you win like a 1.5 million chip pot. You're right back in it. So I was willing to, again, sacrifice some coins to make the right decision in what I believed was the pivotal hand of the match.
Yeah, absolutely. Very key point that you made about this being the pivotal hand, because you had 2.7 to start the hand, which was about 67 big blinds. I had 1.3, which was about 32. So you had a really big chip lead. And like you said, whatever the result of this hand was really going to either turn the tide of battle. So I had more even stacked with you, or I was just going to be left with dust and just be forced to gamble it off. You end up making the right fold actually here, and it was a pretty sick fold for this sizing. But I did manage to even out the score a little bit. So in this hand, blinds are 20K, 40K, and at this point you have about 55 big blinds, 2.2 million, and I'm back up to 1.8, which is about 45 big blinds. A lot more even now. You have the jack of spades, 4 of clubs, you raise and call with the queen of hearts, 3 diamonds. The flop, you make a standard c-bet, 70K. I have a pair of 3s, I'm not going anywhere, I make the call. So the turn comes at 3 of clubs, and I decided to leave for 160. I think this hand is, my logic is similar to the hand where you explained about why you led on the deuce against me. I think this turn, I have more 3s here, calling pre-flop from the big blind. Also some flushes that would want to charge any random club that you have in your hand. This might go check a lot if I checked. So I decided to lead, and interesting enough, you decided to call.
Yeah, my hope was that you would just check river, because that makes it very easy for me to obviously turn a hand that has no showdown value into a bluff here. If it was a situation where you had any type of like semi-bluffs or some weak hands here that you were leading with, thought that I would be able to find a spot to take it away on the river.
Very devious plans. Interesting. The river comes, the 5 of hearts, I'd bet again for 380.
Yeah, so this is interesting because I have a pretty nice card in my hand to bluff with. Like the 4 of clubs is decent. I block some straights, flushes, but I was very surprised when you bet. It certainly looked like value to me, right? And so it was just about like, if I raised here, do I think I could get you to fold some of your value? Like if you had a hand like, let's say, a strong 8x that you chose to play that way, that portion of your range, sure, like some 2 pairs, I could get you to fold, but I'm not going to be able to get you to fold flushes and some of like your strongest trips. And so it was just kind of like a pivot in the moment where I changed my mind and I ended up folding. But I still think it's kind of unclear as to whether you would have folded trips or not to me. So
man, it'd be tough. Looking at this hand now, if you shoved, I think you could definitely have some flushes that just flat the turn, letting me hang myself. One thing I will say though is that what you said, I appreciate, is like you had a clear idea about what you were going to do based on my actions on the river with your position, and the information you got on the river caused you to change your mind. And I think it's okay to do that. You know, a lot of players are just like, well, I don't have anything here on the river and I call the turn. I got to keep telling my story, even though it's probably not going to make that much sense. And he probably has a strong hand, so let's go, you know? And
oh, totally. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes people are afraid to abandon the plan or change their mind or even say it, right? Like, but I feel like that's why poker is such an amazing game. With the turn of a card, your whole thought process can change, and sometimes being stuck in your ways ends up like costing you a lot of chips, you know?
For sure. So the blinds raised to 60K, 120K, and the last hand that we saw was 20K, 40K. So there was a lot of back and forth in between, and I somehow managed to get the chip lead by this hand. And at this point, I had 2.7 million, which was 22 big blinds, and you had 1.1, which is only 9 big blinds. You pick up the 9-3 of spades on the button, you limp in, and I have the 4-3 of hearts. I check my option. Why did you choose to limp here with 9 big blinds left?
With no ante, I didn't want to shove this hand off of 9 bigs effective. I also have some limp traps off of 9 bigs. I have a suited hand, which is like a type of hand I want to see a flop with. I was counting on that they're going to be a little bit tighter in the hands that you're going to shove with pre against me.
Fair enough. The flop comes 5 of spades, 7 of spades, king of hearts. You flop the 9 high flush draw. I flopped a gutter to the 6 and backdoor hearts. You make a C bet, and at this point, it was unclear to me what you could have here, but I don't think that I could call properly with my hand here with the stacks behind, so I decided to just pray that you don't have a hand here. And so I decided to raise.
I totally understand why you check raise with your hands. Like with the weaker part of my limping range there, I'm going to just have some stabs. But I just ended up having the type of hand where I'm just going to go with it off of my stack size.
For sure. Yeah, you just had to fade me having a king, basically.
Yeah.
So many draws that I could be doing this with, right? So this leads us to the final hand. The blinds were still 60K, 120K, which is super high for the heads up, like really
so
high. Yeah, because at this point you had 11 big blinds, 1.4. I had 2.2, 18 big blinds, and automatic hand here. Both of our hands are very happy to get it in here. Not too much needs to be said about this one. Like I mentioned in the beginning, to come to this match with probably less experience in this format than you, for me to be able to survive this long and even get it in here with this amount of big blinds was very fortunate for me, and even more fortunate to hit the jack on the flop and secure the victory.
This hand obviously just played itself, and I feel like, you know, I thought Charlie was tough to play against. I thought you were tough to play against. Like, I never thought that going in there would be like any easy spot. I just am very confident in my abilities, and I'm also very aware of people's perception of me. And with those two things in mind, I feel like I could beat anybody, you know. But I also give every other player like their due respect as well. So.
For sure. Yeah, I saw after this match, you know, your post-match interview, you were very confident with your team. I noticed that you had very good team energy with you and Fedor and Josh, the three of you, and that's something that I think is really important. Even though we're playing separate heads-up matches, but just the fact that you guys are all really good friends, knowing while you're playing, like these guys are rooting for you, and
right. Totally. And I loved that. Like that was definitely one of the most important parts of this portion of the competition, was just like, I knew that the team had my back and I had their back. So it really gave me a very clear mind to be able to play my game, you know, because I felt like they believed in me. I feel like I had to explain to them why I did what I did or my decisions. I felt like they had complete trust in me and I had complete trust in them.
That showed in your discussion about even just the order, you know? Like I noticed that it was very easy for you guys to come to a decision on the first match, letting Fedor go first. And then after Josh won this round, him agreeing to basically let you go first and him go last. The trust that you guys had there, which was, you know, really great. I really appreciate Maria coming in and giving her thoughts on these hands, and definitely got very lucky against her. And but you know, still early on into this show, and there's still many matches to come. And
anything can happen.
Anything can happen. Any final thoughts or anything you want to add?
Just that, like, I was so happy to be a part of this show with people like you. Honestly, I feel like you and I kind of talked about it before. Like, you know, something that I think I had pulled you aside one time after we had played a cash game, and I just said how cool it was, like what you're doing. You know, a little bit of like having that pride for like, there's not a ton of like Taiwanese players that, play high stakes that are like, that have been around for a while and have kind of like paved their own way. And so like, I just really always like wanted to support you in that way. And even being on the show, like even when we weren't on the same team, I found myself like rooting for you, and just things like that. I just feel like you're just one of the good ones.
I appreciate that, Maria. The feeling is very mutual. For those that have not checked out the episode, go to the ggpoker YouTube channel. They have all the episodes there, and still more to come. Hope you guys enjoyed the show.